but also the issue of human rights for the people of Venezuela. We are here, and I should tell you, I think we're working in 3 languages here, but if it all works out, if you listen to the English channel, it'll come out in English. If you're listening to the French channel, it'll come out in French. At least I hope so. If there's any problem, please signal. So we're very pleased that today we had heard from witnesses before the elections, and now with a new parliament in Venezuela, I'm pleased to have before us Mr. Luis Florido, President of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Williams Davila and Mr. Luis Emilio Rodon Hernandez, who are both members of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, and Mr. Freddy Guevara, President of the Standing Committee on Oversight of Government Operations and Public Accounts. The biographies have been circulated to members, and because we're a little late in getting assembled here, I'm going to turn immediately to opening statements, and I have asked our witnesses to leave some time so we can ask questions. I trust that the translations are all working, correct? So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Luis Florido. Welcome to the committee.
Muchas gracias, senadora.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thanking for inviting us to the Democratic Parliament of Canada. We are part of the Venezuelan unit, and last year we had great victory. Our victory was a sign of hope for the Venezuelan people who asked for change. We got 2/3 of Parliament through popular vote, and it was through an asymmetrical election. That is to say, it was like a hockey game. Some of the sides were huge, and the other team was tiny, sort of just like a small town team. But despite this, we still managed to win tremendous victory. But after we won on the 6th of December, on the 23rd of December, just a few days after this victory, the National Assembly swore in 3 judges to the Supreme Court. One at the time was a member and voted for himself as a judge to the Supreme Court. On the 30th of December, the first sentence against the Parliament began. And so 4 members of the Amazon state were essentially in a state of legal limbo. And they have been kept out of the Parliament of Venezuela. There have been sentences at the Supreme Court of Venezuela, which is essentially influenced by the president. There have been 17 sentences against the Parliament, the National Parliament at this time, 4 per month since then. Before 2015, there was not a single sentence against the Parliament of Venezuela. And this shows how serious the power problems are in our country. And the consequence of this is that the people of Venezuela, who were going through a huge crisis that you have seen now, they feel very frustrated by what's happening. They've been asking for change. It hasn't been satisfied since the 6th of December. In Venezuela, we have political prisoners. Not a single democracy can exist with political prisoners. 117 people, 16 people are in prison. 3 of them are members who were recently elected. Of the political prisoners, there's the leader of the party that Mr. Rondon represents. He was a presidential candidate in 2006. Another prisoner is the lawyer, the mayor of the city of San Cristobal. This is in the southeast of Venezuela. One of the prisoners is the mayor of Caracas, the most important mayor in our country. There's another prisoner, is the leader of our party, Freddy Guevara's party, and my party, Leopoldo Lopez. He He has been in isolation for 27 months. And when you have a member of parliament jailed, essentially people feel being a month in jail is like being a year in jail. So to be in jail for 27 months is like being there for 27 years. This is a huge violation of human rights. And so we've put forward an amnesty law that was recently approved. This amnesty law was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Part of what we want is to have this amnesty, but this has not been allowed by the Supreme Court of Venezuela. Venezuelans are also going through a huge humanitarian crisis. Here's some idea of what's going on. Of every 10 food products, you can only find 2 in our country. Of every 10 medicines, you can only find 1 of them in our country. Recently, we went to a hospital in the city of Carora, in the state of Lara, and we asked doctors, what are you doing? What do you do when a patient has convulsions? And the person said, well, we stand there with them, we hold their hand, and we just watch them die. Because there are no drugs. There's no anticonvulsive medication that would stop the person from dying. This is what's happening with patients who suffer from hemophilia, from HIV, from AIDS, from diabetes, people who suffer from cancer, people who have illnesses which normally would be simple to deal with in a place like Canada. You just give them medication and you're done. But there is no medicine in Venezuela, and people are dying. This humanitarian crisis exists in a country where currently there's a 400% rate of inflation. And people think that in the next year, the inflation rate will be 2,300%. This is according to the IMF. Over the past 17 years, we've gotten $1,500 trillion. So we're talking about an amount of money. I don't even know. You can't even put all the number of zeros on this table. It's so much money. And 400 billion of these dollars were stolen. And Member Guevara and his committee are studying this theft. So in a country like Venezuela, we have larger oil reserves than Canada. We, in fact, have the largest oil reserves in the world. So how is it that we are a poor, rich country? Well, it's because the personal accounts of the people who are leading our country are huge. They take their money to bank accounts in Switzerland, in Andorra. This huge institutional crisis that Venezuela is going through is one that affects human rights. It affects humanitarian issues. And as a result of this, parliamentarians felt that we needed a way out. We needed to take a decision. The Venezuelan constitution provides for a number of mechanisms that will allow for political change. The first one is a recall referendum. And we are trying to make this happen. With 20% of the signatures of our voters, we can hold a recall referendum of the president. However, the election institute, which is in the hands of the president, have slowed down the approval of this recall referendum, and they're just using administrative means to slow down the process. What other mechanisms do we have? There are amendments to the Constitution if we wanted. So in conclusion, Venezuela is a pressure cooker, and there's absolutely no release valve right now. If we don't provide a release valve to our country, unfortunately, the pressure cooker can explode. It will destabilize not only Venezuela, but also the Caribbean, Central America, and the northern part of South America. And this is extremely serious. The government systematically attacks all those who speak out loud and say something about what's going on in Venezuela. But in the end, because of this, everyone remains silent because they're afraid of being attacked by the government, and because that's what the government's strategy is, to attack. And so we ask you that you speak out about what's going on in Venezuela. And that you find mechanisms to show your solidarity, at least with regards to medication. The simple fact that members of the National Assembly last week went to the General Secretary of the OAS, Luis Almagro, in Washington as a result of this visit. We have now been taken to court for the fact that we are doing something against our country. But in fact, we went to the OAS to defend our people and to defend our country. We're asking that our democracy be defended in Venezuela, but the response was that we are going to be tried. But we will continue forward, because what our political prisoners are going through is worth the fight. Our citizens don't have food or medication, and it's worth fighting for them. And we have to pay the price in order to save the interests of our citizens. Thank you.
Will any of the other members be speaking?